Jason Reeves loved his wife, Emily, until the night he found out who she really was. What followed wasn't an argument, or a breakup. It was a calculated murder, a chilling photograph sent to her secret lover, and a vanishing act that left police stunned. Why did Jason stage her body like a message? What secret had he been hiding long before Emily's betrayal? This is the story of a perfect husband, with a terrifying plan, and how love turned into the ultimate trap. Jason Reeves stood at the edge of his driveway, sipping his morning coffee, waving at neighbors like he always did. To everyone in Lake Hill, he and his wife, Emily, were the picture of stability. Their white two-story home, with red shutters and a freshly mowed lawn, was the type of house people slowed down to admire. Their Instagram was filled with smiling selfies, beach vacations, gym sessions, and anniversary dinners. They were the kind of couple others secretly envied, fit, successful, deeply in love, or so it seemed. But behind the closed doors of 47 Mayfield Lane, something else had started to grow. Something quiet and sour. It began with small things: a missed goodnight kiss, locked phone screens, cold dinners left untouched. Jason noticed Emily had started sleeping with her back turned. When he spoke to her, she answered quickly, vaguely, like she was half listening. And then there were the late meetings, the unexplained detours, the lingering scent of expensive cologne that didn't belong to him. Jason tried to brush it off. Everyone goes through rough patches, he told himself. Maybe she was stressed, maybe the housing market was just getting to her, but deep down, a gnawing suspicion began to take root, and once it did, it spread like mold. He began watching more closely. One night he pretended to be asleep and heard her whispering on the phone in the hallway. When he confronted her, the next morning, she dismissed it as a late-night client call. He wanted to believe her, but he didn't. As the days passed, Jason's smiles in public stayed the same, but his eyes had changed. He stopped training as hard at the gym. He started spending more time alone. He found himself replaying old memories of their early days together. How they met at a mutual friend's party. How she laughed too loudly and danced barefoot on the grass. He used to love how free she was. Now she just seemed distant. Secretive. Like a stranger had moved into his wife's skin. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, Jason picked up her phone. It was locked, and the passcode had been changed. She had never changed it before. That was the moment something inside him snapped. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Something was definitely going on. But instead of confronting her again, Jason made a decision. He wouldn't accuse. He wouldn't yell. He would observe. That week, he bought a small USB spy cam online. He installed it behind a vent in their bedroom, then another one in the living room clock. He even slipped a tracking device into her keychain, disguised as a decorative charm. Jason wasn't acting like himself anymore, but he couldn't stop. He had to know the truth, and he had to see it for himself. Late at night, when Emily was asleep, Jason would sit in the garage, reviewing footage frame by frame. Most nights, there was nothing, just her watching TV, brushing her hair, or texting with a blank expression. But one night, he saw her dressed differently. Carefully, she changed 3 times before leaving the house. She checked her lipstick in the mirror, smirked to herself, and left with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't return until after midnight. She didn't know Jason had been awake the entire time, lying in bed with his eyes wide open, imagining what she had been doing. The footage offered no answers, only more questions. Jason stopped eating. He barely slept. Every beep of her phone made his heart race. And yet he said nothing. He smiled. He kissed her forehead when she left for work. But each time she walked out the door, Jason wondered if she was walking toward someone else. The silence between them grew thicker, and within that silence, Jason's thoughts darkened. It wasn't just about catching her, it became something deeper, something obsessive. He no longer wanted answers, he wanted control, and though no one in the neighborhood noticed a thing, the perfect couple was standing at the edge of something irreversible. All that was left was the moment it would snap. Emily Reeves had always been the type to turn heads. With her effortless charm and striking presence, she knew how to hold a room's attention without saying much. As a real estate agent, she sold more than just houses, she sold dreams, lifestyles, futures. People trusted her. They listened to her advice, invited her into their homes, and told her their secrets. But Emily had secrets of her own, ones she kept buried beneath a perfect smile and a carefully curated life. It started with a showing. Just another million-dollar property nestled in the hills above Lake Hill. Darren Cole was the buyer. Tall, confident, sharply dressed, and much more interested in Emily than the house. At first, she didn't think much of it. Clients flirted all the time, but Darren was different. He lingered after the tour ended. He asked personal questions in a casual tone, complimented her too directly, too often. And he didn't just disappear after the sale fell through. Instead, he kept reaching out for coffee, for networking, for small talk that led to longer conversations. Emily told herself it was harmless. She wasn't looking for anything. She loved her husband, didn't she? But her texts to Darren grew longer. She began hiding her phone when Jason entered the room. She saved his number under a fake name and deleted entire conversations before bedtime. What started as playful turned into something much harder to ignore. Darren made her feel seen, heard, wanted in a way that Jason no longer did. When she finally agreed to meet him outside of work, she crossed a line she would never be able to uncross. They met at a boutique hotel 30 minutes outside of town. The first time was quick, clumsy, full of nervous laughter and whispered apologies. But it didn't end there. One meeting turned into 3, then 6, then a regular habit. They used fake names at check-in. She turned off her phone every time they met. The lies came easier than she expected. Showing a listing, client, dinner, traffic's bad. And Jason, quiet and trusting, never pushed back. Or so she thought. Darren started asking questions. Emily didn't want to answer. Why haven't you left him yet? When are you going to be mine? He sent gifts. A bracelet with her initials. A bottle of perfume, he said, reminded him of her. She hid them in her car and wore them when she was with him. It was reckless, but it made her feel alive again. The danger of it all only added to the rush. But Darren was growing impatient. He wanted more than stolen afternoons and hidden messages. He wanted her to choose. Emily promised she would, just not yet. She told him Jason was going through a rough time, that she didn't want to hurt him. But the truth was more complicated. Emily didn't know what she wanted. She liked the safety of her marriage, the structure, but she also liked the fire that Darren brought into her world. She was living 2 lives, and both were starting to spin out of control. Meanwhile, Jason knew everything. The client dinners, the hotel receipts, the hidden second phone. He had found it all. But he never let on. He played the role of the clueless husband perfectly, smiling through the lies, studying her every move. Emily believed she was one step ahead. In reality, she was walking through a trap she didn't even see. She didn't know Jason had tracked the hotel. She didn't know he had photos, grainy but clear enough. She didn't know he had watched her step out of Darren's car late one night, fixing her hair, adjusting her blouse. And worst of all, she didn't know Jason wasn't just watching anymore. He was waiting, quietly, patiently, because for Jason, this wasn't just betrayal, it was war. And every day Emily kept lying. She was digging her own grave just a little deeper. Jason Reeves had stopped thinking like a husband. He had started thinking like a soldier. Every smile, every kind gesture he offered Emily now, was part of a larger plan, one that grew sharper and darker with each passing day. He no longer hoped for honesty or resolution. He had abandoned the idea of fixing anything. Now, he was hunting the truth and preparing for what came next. He began with the smallest of steps, things no one would notice. He started keeping a detailed log on his laptop, hidden beneath layers of encrypted folders. Every time Emily left the house, he noted the time, the outfit, the excuse she gave. He cross-referenced it with GPS data from the tracking chip he'd planted in her car key fob. When she claimed to be showing a home in Westbridge, he watched her location stop for hours at a hotel just off the highway. Her phone would go dark during those visits, always in airplane mode or completely shut off. Jason mapped the patterns, Tuesdays and Fridays, always around the same time. He learned how long she stayed. He learned which side of the parking lot she used. He even learned that Darren drove a black BMW with tinted windows and a chipped rear bumper. Jason didn't follow them, not yet. He didn't need to. Technology gave him everything he needed from a distance. But watching wasn't enough. Jason needed proof. Not just to know, but to own the knowledge. He UGI'd his home surveillance system, replacing the old cameras with high-resolution models that could pick up even the smallest facial expressions. He wired the bedroom lamp, the hallway mirror, even the air vent in the living room. All of it streamed to a private server, one only he could access. He checked the feeds constantly, sometimes in the middle of the night, while Emily slept beside him, breathing evenly. Unaware, Jason stared into the glowing screens of his phone, watching recordings of her pacing the house, laughing at texts, sometimes staring out the window with a distant look in her eyes. She looked happy in those moments, not with him but in anticipation of something else, someone else. Jason also began recording audio. Small microphone under the dining room table caught fragments of her whispered conversations. Most of them were harmless, business talk, phone calls with friends, but once in a while, he caught something more. "I'll see you soon. I miss you." "Not tonight, he's home." The words stung, but Jason didn't flinch anymore. Pain had hardened into cold focus. He began staging the house, subtle changes to test her reactions. He left her phone unplugged. He moved her purse to a different table. He opened her closet just slightly, then watched the recordings to see how she responded. She noticed every time. She had grown jumpy, careful, like someone who feared being caught. But she never said a word. That silence confirmed everything Jason needed to know. Then he took it one step further. He left the house one evening with an overnight bag, claiming he had a fitness conference 2 towns over. Instead, he parked around the corner and waited. For 5 hours, and just after midnight, headlights turned onto their street. A black BMW. Jason watched from a distance as Darren entered his home. Through his phone, he watched live footage from inside. Darren stepping into the hallway, Emily greeting him with a soft embrace. Jason's hands trembled, but not from rage, from clarity. The lies were no longer just imagined. They were real, breathing, walking, touching the life he had built with her. He didn't confront them. He didn't storm in or call the police. He just watched, memorizing every detail, because Jason had stopped reacting. Now he was orchestrating. Every click of his mouse, every frame of video was part of a carefully unfolding script, and Emily, unknowingly, had taken center stage in a play that would end exactly how he wanted it to. The night air was thick with humidity, and storm clouds had begun to roll in over Lake Hill, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. Jason Reeves stood in the dim light of his garage, staring at his reflection in the car window. He was dressed for travel, gym bag in hand, shoes clean, jacket zipped. Every detail was precise, every move rehearsed. He had made sure to tell Emily about the fitness seminar 2 weeks in advance. He even printed out a fake itinerary and left it on the kitchen counter. Emily had smiled and nodded when he told her. She didn't ask questions. That, more than anything, confirmed what Jason already knew. She was waiting for him to leave. At 6:45 p.m., Jason backed out of the driveway and drove to the edge of town. He stopped at a rest area off the highway, pulled into a parking space under a broken light, and waited. He checked the GPS tracker. Emily was still home. He waited an hour, then 2. At exactly 9:27 p.m., her car left the driveway and headed west. But something was different this time. Emily didn't drive to the hotel, she drove straight home after a detour. Jason zoomed in on the live GPS data, confused. She had picked Darren up. The two of them were now inside the house. His house. Jason's pulse pounded, but he stayed still. He didn't go back right away. He waited. Watched the live stream through his phone as Darren walked through the front door, shook off his coat, and followed Emily into the living room. They opened a bottle of wine, they laughed, they kissed. Jason watched from the shadows, eyes wide, jaw clenched. Just after 11 p.m., Jason returned, this time through the back door. He had planned this route. The camera facing the back entrance was already disabled. His boots were wrapped in cloth to avoid noise. Every step was measured. He had rehearsed it in his mind hundreds of times, like a military, but this wasn't a mission. This was personal. Inside, the air smelled faintly of perfume and red wine. Jason moved silently through the hallway, pausing just outside the living room. He could hear Darren's voice, low and relaxed. Then footsteps. Darren headed to the bathroom. Emily moved toward the bedroom. Jason slipped through the shadows and disappeared into the guest room, waiting. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Darren left, casually, like it was any other night. He had no idea what was still inside the house, waiting in silence, inches from the edge. Jason emerged when everything was still. Emily was in the bedroom, fixing her hair in front of the mirror, nowhere. There was no confrontation, no yelling, no chance for apologies. Jason had rehearsed the moment so many times that when it finally came, he moved with terrifying precision. The scarf was already in his pocket. Her favorite one, the one she wore in autumn. He had chosen it, intentionally. The act itself was quiet. Swift. 1 second she stood in front of the mirror, and the next, she collapsed, the reflection catching only a blur of motion. No screams, no last words, just silence. Jason stood over her, chest heaving, blood thundering in his ears. He didn't cry, he didn't tremble. He simply knelt down, brushing a lock of hair from her face. The woman he had loved, trusted, built a life with, now lying still at his feet. He carried her body to the bed. Not with anger, but with eerie calm. He dressed her in clean clothes, laid her down gently, folded her hands over her stomach. Then he lit a candle on the nightstand and stood back, studying the scene. There was one more thing left to do. Jason reached for her phone, unlocked it with her fingerprint, opened the messaging app, found Darren's contacts. Then, with cold precision, he raised the phone, snapped a photo, and typed 7 words that would shatter everything. "She's all yours now." He hit send. Darren Cole was lying in bed, half asleep when his phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was some late-night notification. But when the screen lit up with Emily's name, his curiosity spiked. He opened the message, expecting a joke, a flirtatious remark, maybe an "I miss you." What he saw instead made his skin crawl. It was a photo. Emily lying on her bed, eyes closed, hands folded neatly over her chest. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted, and something about the stillness of her body was instantly wrong. Darren's stomach turned. There was no filter, no glamour, no smile, just the flat light of a bedside lamp and a disturbing absence of life in her expression. Below the image was a caption, "She's all yours now." Darren sat up, heart pounding. At first, he thought it was a prank. Maybe Emily had staged the photo to scare him. But as he stared closer, the horror settled in. Her skin looked too cold, too lifeless. The room around her was eerily quiet in the background. No signs of movement, no blur of a timer or someone taking the photo. It looked real. Panic surged through him. He tried calling her, but the phone rang once and went straight to voicemail. He called again. Nothing. Then he noticed something even more unsettling. The message had been sent from her phone minutes ago, yet the photo looked like something taken much earlier. Like it had been planned. Darren didn't wait. Within 5 minutes, he was on the phone with 911. He avoided telling them the full truth, only saying he'd received a disturbing image from someone he knew professionally. He gave them Emily's address and stayed on the line, his voice tight with fear and uncertainty. By 12:45 a.m., police cars rolled quietly into the Reeves neighborhood. Lights off, no sirens, just quiet urgency. Officers approached the front door, found it unlocked, and stepped inside with weapons drawn. The house was dark, silent, perfectly still. They found Emily in the bedroom, just as the photo had shown, fully dressed, carefully arranged, no signs of a struggle. The candle on the nightstand had burned low, casting soft flickers of light on the wall. It was a scene that felt more like a shrine than a crime scene. The officers cleared the rest of the house, expecting to find a second body or someone hiding, but there was no one else. Jason was gone. The investigation began immediately. Detectives arrived within the hour. They took photos, collected fingerprints, searched for notes. But the scene had been disturbingly clean. No blood, no signs of forced entry, no indication of what had happened, except for the body, the pose and the message that had led them there. By 2 a.m., Jason's phone pinged a cell tower outside the city, but it went dark shortly after. Darren was brought in for questioning just before dawn. His story was cautious. He admitted to knowing Emily, admitted to the affair when pressed, but insisted he had no idea where Jason was or what had happened. He didn't mention the hotel meetings. He didn't reveal the gifts, the pressure, the messages asking her to leave her husband. He simply said he was afraid for her and called police when he saw the image. Detectives didn't buy the full story, but at the moment, they had bigger questions. Where was Jason Reeves? Neighbors were questioned. Security footage from surrounding homes was collected. Nothing showed Jason returning that night. No car, no shadows, no trace. It was as if he had vanished completely. But investigators knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. The precision of the scene, the chilling message, the vanishing act, it all pointed to something planned, something deeply personal. And somewhere out there, Jason was watching it all unfold, one calculated step at a time. By sunrise, the Reeves residence had become a crime scene swarmed by detectives, crime techs, and yellow tape. The carefully maintained front lawn was now littered with footprint markers and camera flashes. Emily's lifeless body had been removed just before dawn, but her eerie presence still hung thick in the air. The bedroom was untouched, except for what Jason had left behind, a scene too perfect to be accidental. Detective Amanda Griggs, known for her quiet intensity, was one of the first to step inside. As she looked around the home, she noticed something that didn't sit right. It wasn't just clean, it was controlled. The house wasn't in disarray like most domestic crime scenes. There were no signs of panic or sudden violence, no broken lamps, no defensive wounds on the victim. Everything had been arranged with deliberate care, especially Emily. Her hands were folded over her chest like she was being presented, not hidden. The lighting in the room had been dimmed just enough to soften the harshness of death. Even the candle had been placed, as if it served a purpose. It all felt ritualistic. The autopsy confirmed what they feared: manual strangulation. No signs of a struggle. No foreign DNA under her nails. The killer had taken his time, used precision, and had likely caught her off guard. Based on the condition of the body, time of death was estimated around midnight, just minutes before the photo was sent. Darren Cole was still being held for questioning at the station. His alibi was murky. He claimed to have left the house just before midnight, unaware of what would happen next. But security footage from a gas station near the Reeves house showed Darren's car driving away at 12, a detail that aligned exactly with the timestamp of the photo message. His involvement was undeniable, even if the murder wasn't his. What made things even more complicated was Jason's behavior in the days leading up to the crime. When officers spoke to friends and neighbors, they all said the same thing. Jason had seemed calm, cheerful even. He had spoken about the fitness conference with enthusiasm, posted photos from previous years, and made casual jokes on social media about getting some space. No one suspected anything. It was as if he had rehearsed the performance. Then the police found the surveillance setup. Hidden cameras were wired into the bedroom, living room, and hallway. Jason had installed a local server behind a false wall in the basement. It was protected by a password, but once investigators cracked it, they discovered months' worth of footage, thousands of hours documenting Emily's daily routine, her meetings with Darren, her phone calls, her movements, everything. One file stood out, a folder labeled Final Phase. Inside were screenshots, notes, GPS logs of Emily's car, and a detailed breakdown of her weekly schedule. There were even time-stamped notes estimating how long she stayed with Darren during hotel visits. Jason hadn't just snapped. He had planned everything with clinical detail. The last note in the folder sent chills down Detective Griggs' spine. When truth becomes unbearable, control becomes peace. End phase, silent. By now Jason had become the most wanted man in the state. Warrants were issued. Airports were no-aid. His photo appeared on national news within 24 hours. But he'd left behind no trace of where he had gone. His gym membership had been cancelled. His phone was destroyed. Credit cards untouched. His car, found abandoned near a hiking trail, held nothing but a folded sweatshirt and an empty water bottle. It was clear Jason didn't run in panic. He disappeared with intention, and while the world tried to figure out where he'd gone, detectives were left staring at a man who had documented his wife's affair in silence for months, only to respond with a single message, a posed body, and then vanish. But someone like Jason Reeves didn't vanish without a reason. He had one more move. One more surprise, and it was still waiting to be found. The media called it the perfect betrayal case. Jason Reeves' photo was everywhere. TV screens, highway billboards, newspapers. The story of a husband turned predator who uncovered his wife's affair, staged her murder like a farewell gift, and then vanished without a trace. The public was captivated, but for the detectives on the case, the attention was a distraction. They knew there was still something missing, something Jason had planned for but hadn't yet revealed. 3 days after Emily's body was found, the break finally came. A ranger spotted a hiker's journal abandoned on a rocky overlook in a remote state park. Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to "the ones who knew me." The paper had Jason's fingerprints, and the writing matched his exactly. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even an apology. It was a cold, dull, articulate message that seemed more like a manifesto than anything else. He wrote about betrayal, how it erodes a man slowly, how the silence between two people becomes louder than any scream. He described how Emily had died to him long before the night she stopped breathing. But more chilling than the emotionless prose was the way he described the act itself. Jason claimed it wasn't murder. He called it a release. A final correction to a story that had lost its purpose. The letter ended with this line: "Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper behind a closed door." Detectives used the ranger's find to refocus their search on the surrounding woods. They brought in dogs, drones, and heat sensors. But Jason wasn't there. He never had been. Investigators believed he left the notebook intentionally, another part of his narrative, another distraction. A week later, a debit card tied to an old gym account was used at a rural bus station 3 states away. Surveillance footage showed a man in a hoodie, head down, hands in pockets. The build matched Jason, but the face was hidden. By the time authorities arrived, he was gone again, like smoke slipping through cracks. Then came the confession, but not the one they expected. Jason's lawyer showed up at the police station, calm and prepared. He handed over a document signed by Jason, prepared weeks before Emily's murder. It detailed every part of the surveillance, the tracking, even the message to Darren. The attorney said Jason wanted it known that he did not act in rage. He acted with clarity. In the signed statement, Jason claimed responsibility for Emily's death, but denied that it was a murder in the traditional sense. He said she had made her choice, and he had made his. The paper didn't offer insight into his whereabouts or plans, but it did confirm one thing. He was still alive and watching everything unfold, just as he intended. That same week, another detail surfaced, one that no one had seen coming. A woman named Lana Brenner came forward after recognizing Jason's face on the news. She was calm, direct, and knew things no one else did. She had once been engaged to Jason during his time in the Marines, years before he met Emily. She claimed Jason had faked his death back then to avoid military charges tied to an off-the-record assault investigation. He disappeared, re-emerged a year later with a new identity, and started fresh. She had buried the truth until now. Detectives were stunned. If Lana was telling the truth, then Jason had pulled off something like this before: an erasure, a rebirth, a calculated vanishing act. They reopened old files, looked at every detail of Jason's past, and the more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Emily's murder may not have been the beginning of Jason's descent. It may have been the continuation of something much older, something colder. Jason Reeves wasn't running, he was evolving, and the world still hadn't seen his final move. The trial began 6 months after Emily Reeves was found dead in her own home. But the man at the center of it, Jason Reeves, wasn't dragged into court in handcuffs, hiding behind lawyers or begging for leniency. He walked into the courtroom with his head high, wearing a dark suit, clean-shaven, calm as ever. He had turned himself in. No one saw it coming. Jason had resurfaced in Arizona, using a fake name and living under the radar in a desert motel. He contacted a private attorney, then arranged a quiet surrender. When he walked into a police station 3 states away, he offered no resistance, no speech, just a nod and a whispered sentence: "Let's get this over with." What followed was even more chilling than the murder itself. Jason didn't plead guilty. He didn't try to escape responsibility either. Instead, he insisted on a trial, refusing any plea deal. The prosecutors were confident. After all, they had overwhelming evidence. Surveillance footage from his own cameras, GPS data, the pre-written documents, the photos sent to Darren, the staged crime scene. Every detail pointed to premeditated murder. And yet Jason's defense didn't deny any of it. They agreed with the facts, but they argued something no one was prepared for: that Jason hadn't killed out of rage, but out of psychological necessity, that he'd been manipulated, tormented, emotionally destroyed, and finally pushed to reclaim his own narrative in the only way he knew how. The court watched, fascinated and disturbed, as Jason spoke on the stand. He described how he had become a spectator in his own life, how he had watched the woman he loved become someone else. He never raised his voice, never showed anger. His words were steady, measured, chilling in their clarity. He called what he did an act of control, not vengeance. And somehow that made it worse. But just when it seemed the story had reached its darkest point, another revelation shifted everything. During the 3rd week of the trial, a new witness was quietly added to the schedule: Lana Brenner, Jason's ex-fiancée. She had been working with investigators for weeks behind the scenes. On the stand, she revealed details that stunned the court: the fake death years ago, the mysterious disappearances, Jason's obsession with watching people without them knowing. She described a man who didn't snap under pressure, but someone who collected betrayal like trophies and responded not with anger but with cold, patient silence. Even more disturbing, she revealed that Jason had spoken about ending things the right way long before he even met Emily. Her testimony painted a chilling portrait, not of a man who lost control, but of one who had always been waiting for the right moment to use it. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Jason Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder, with special circumstances due to premeditation and psychological manipulation. The judge called it one of the most haunting cases he had ever seen, a crime so deliberate, so artistically cruel, that it elevated murder into a calculated message. Jason was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Darren Cole disappeared from the public eye entirely. After his involvement in the case made national headlines, he sold his business and quietly relocated overseas. He never spoke publicly about Emily again. Lana Brenner, however, published a memoir detailing her past with Jason and the years of silence that followed. It became a bestseller within weeks. In her book, she wrote one line that echoed across book reviews and true crime forums: Jason Reeves didn't kill for love. He killed to be remembered. Emily Reeves was buried in a quiet cemetery outside Lake Hill. Her headstone was simple, bearing no dates, no epitaph, just her name. Some say it was Jason's final request before disappearing that night, that no one be allowed to write her story but him. And for a time, he succeeded. But now, the world knows the truth. The betrayal, the silence, the message, and the man who turned revenge into an art form.